Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. This is Jamie and Jerri. Thank you so much for joining. Jerri, when I taught, and then also when I do coaching and mentoring for teachers, I always try to give tips and strategies for not being that sage on the stage, but instead that guide on the side, that facilitator to let students go, to let them be in charge of their own learning. Because if we continue to spoon feed them, then what are they going to be? They're not going to be able to take care of us when our old age, right? We need them to be in charge of their own learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that we're finding out that they're more engaged when they're in charge of their own learning. They
Right.
want to be there. They're excited about learning, and it makes a great difference. Well, today we have our guest, Deb Dunstone, with us, and she's coming to us from Australia. And nothing makes me happier than when we have a global guest. I guess because I used to teach social studies, it just makes my heart so happy that we connect educators from around the world, share ideas, learn from each other, and become better for kids. So we are so happy to have Deb here with us, and she is with a group called The Learner First. And if you remember, we had Joanne McCutcheon on, and she is with The Learner First as well, but they different aspects that they will be talking about. But I will tell you, Deb, I have dug into the books. I'm reading two of them now that Joanne had written, and it's really amazing. And I see in the storybook that I've been reading how it's just pretty much what our life is like now. So it's been a pleasure, and I am excited to have you on today to talk about student agency. So welcome to LinkedUp Podcast.
Oh, thanks, Jerri and Jamie. It's an absolute privilege to be here and I guess share a little bit of our journey. And my favourite book of Joanne's is Human Return, but I'm guessing you're reading Depth File Detective, which is the student story. So if we talk about student agency, it's a terrific place to start when, as an educator, you read, I guess, an academic book written through the lens of a student. And what that means to students. So it brings that student agency into a different conversation. And really happy to talk about some of that this morning. I say this morning, it's this morning over here. It's very early in the morning in Australia, but lovely to be here.
We appreciate you waking her up and looking so pretty so early in the morning.
Oh, amazing. Well, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you came to The Learner First and what that is all about? Because I'm learning so much more about it.
Yeah. Look, Jerri, like all of us, we've had really strong careers in education. So 33 years as a teacher, principal, regional director, come superintendent in the language in America. And then I had a very privileged role leading the education department and ministry, and did a really large piece of work around inclusion. And what is that we needed to do to ensure that every student was in the room? And with a very strong focus on disability, culture, First Nations students, students from, English, where English isn't their first language, students in out-of-home care. When you kind of take that lens of inclusion, I had done a very large piece of work across Queensland in Australia, leading and performing that. And it was at a time where I thought, I really want to get into the practice. I've spent my career as a superintendent, district leader, deputy director general. I want to try and give that back to say, how do you take policy into practice? And I guess the work that Joanne had been doing, and when she approached me after I'd left and sort of said, I think I had a coffee, and then she said, I went home and I think I had a job interview. It was about saying, do you want to do some work to actually, talk this globally and to actually talk about how you combine academic learning and social and emotional learning with student agency to come together in what we would call, and what Joanne has written about, in terms of contributed learning. And it's a really nice match. Often what I see, and you can, certainly tell me, Jerri and Jerri, if this is the same. We see teachers do pockets of work.
Yes.
I often call it, the baubles on the Christmas tree. Let's have a project over here called wellbeing. Let's have another project called behavior. Let's have another project called,
Right.
artificial intelligence in school and what's possible. But we keep adding things on for teachers and educators. And somewhere in that, we lose the magic of teaching, and we lose the magic of student agency and the voice of a student. And I often will have teachers or educators say to me, "Oh, but student agency just means giving them a choice in the curriculum." I'm like, no, student agency is so much more than that. It's actually about when we flip the teaching cycle and we actually consider students first and curriculum second. And the power of that is obviously the relationship that teachers have with their students. So when we actually know and understand each other and who we are, how we fit into the world, how we think about learning and curriculum, then a teacher who has the best job in the world, the absolute best job in the world, has the power to create the curriculum and the learning experiences for all of their students to be in the room, included, and with a sense of agency. And that's not about saying, "Oh, I don't want to do this topic. I'd rather do this topic. That's my favorite topic." I mean, the teachers, we are the guides. We are to give students a range of experiences and knowledge. And so when you really take that student agency lens and kind of flip your thinking to go self-understanding and every student in the room, and the inclusion of all of those children in your club. We often say to a teacher, "Tell us who you can't," because that little person is missing out. And the teacher has to flip their thinking about where they meet them and how they meet and how they actually get them engaged in the curriculum. And of course, sometimes that is through their passion. When you know that, a boy just loves trucks, then you'll do everything in your power to make sure that's the magazine he's doing his article from, or that the video that you're about to watch, or, you'll use all those engagements. But it's actually through the lens of self-understanding. And I think as the world has changed and we've, come a long way from COVID, we're talking about some different things moving forward. And I think you said to hear, we're going to, these children are going to look after us when we're old. And I want them to be the very best contributors to the world that they can be. And every single person on this globe has to contribute to a better future in whatever level and whatever skill set that is. And teachers hold the magic to empower that passion. And, if you think about that, then that's student agency. So it's a really deep definition in my mind that actually takes all of these little components we've had in the past that we focused on. And I'm sure you've had a multitude of guests in this great podcast series. And everyone will talk about their little piece of passion. And there's something about that for teachers who have to make that easy. And it's actually quite difficult at the moment. And when we work with educators, I guess we've got to peel that onion back and find that magic. And I was just working with a group of teachers yesterday here. We've actually got the entire executive team of the Learner First Australia at the moment, an absolute privilege. And we've been holding some principal roundtables to really talk about the challenges, to talk about the things that, we're worried about. And so that student agency and inclusion kind of always bumming to the top. What is it that needs to change? And of course, layer upon layer, the curriculum expectation for teachers feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
They feel they've got so much rule, so much accountability, so much paperwork, so much risk assessments, whatever it might be, that they've kind of lost that love of letting the curriculum open up a bit more. We're kind of in a privileged position at the moment in Australia, or I hope it's a privileged position. There's been a rewrite of our Australian curriculum, and you would have had curriculum rewrites in the States My worry or fear is that teachers try to retrofit their current curriculum to the new version.
Yeah.
And there's something about every country in the globe as we're traveling is trying to open up curriculum and give teachers more choice. And I keep saying to them, you don't have to do all those things anymore. Just focus on the assessment standard. Focus on the criteria for which you're assessing. Understand who your student is. Know them intimately as a learner. Give them some agency and allow them in their own way to show you as the educator what they can do. And, someone sort of said, oh, but is that equity, Deb? Is that fair? I'm like, yeah, it's absolutely fair. We are not in the process of ranking and judging every student. We're
Right.
actually in the process of assessing their contribution to the assessment standard. And so
Right.
someone, said to me, so a C, when they do an oral, are you saying that if we moderate that the C in a written piece could be the same C or the same grade? I'm like, I'm absolutely saying that. So I think there's a really mature conversation. And I've often said to Joanne, the nut to crack globally is assessment. We've actually tied ourselves up in knots, whether it's systemic assessment, statewide testing, teachers feeling like, they've almost got to have the bell come. We've let go of all of that, or we should have. And in whatever criteria we see globally, the challenge for student agency is to get kids to tell us what they can do, to show us in their own way. And in that space, their excitement about learning is all-time high. And as we work with some schools where we see this come together, where teachers put both the academic and the social, emotional well-being care components together and call that contribution and have a deep understanding of authentic mixed method assessment, then we see teachers and students through it. And, we'll often see teachers give us a showcase event back, tell us, we're getting to pick one student, focus on that initially. And of course, the moment a teacher changes their pedagogy for one student, they've actually changed it for their class and all students in that class. When I wrote the inclusive education policy here in Queensland, I used to talk about reasonable adjustment. And in the disability or First Nations, we often use language like that. I'd now stop. We all learn, we're learners together. I'd probably now want to have a conversation more about authentic assessment, because if teachers are in tune with authentic assessment, then they're actually in tune with understanding that for every learner in their class, regardless of who they are, what their skill or ability is, they can actually adjust the assessment. It's a really interesting concept, and it doesn't take any resource to do. It doesn't take a specialized program. It's not a thing that you buy and add into your curriculum. It's actually kind of peeling back the teaching and learning process. And so many, in those that are just a little older than we are, ladies, had said, we used to do this as teachers. Teaching used to be fun.
Yes.
Teaching used to have passion and love. And we said, you know what? That's actually what the globe needs. That's actually what we've got to get back to. Notwithstanding we're in a different system and we've got to be accountable. We absolutely need to report to parents, but we need parents in our community as partners in that learning. And so when I kind of work with a school and we do support system leaders, and in our role as the learner first, and you did ask me about that at the beginning, Jerri, I guess we're the executive coaches and support to help principals and system leaders peel back the layers to allow teachers to have the time and space to integrate all of this together and to actually put it into the teaching and learning process. It sounds simple. It's a little hard to do, because what sits in those conversations for superintendent, for principals, is the unpacking of all of the assumptions we hold about teaching.
Right.
Oh, there's a lovely chapter if you are reading, and I know Joanne would have probably talked about her book, Human Return. There's a fabulous chapter there about assumptions that we hold. So the moment you talk about inclusion or student agency, you'll have, someone like the maths or science faculty that will say, but if we don't do the test, then that's not fair. There's a one-hit wonder. And somewhere along the way, I think we forgot the difference between formative and summative.
Mm-hmm.
Summative being the sum of, not the final test. And sure, we've got statewide testing globally in every country that we're working with. And that's just a thing that we do. But all of the other pieces of teacher judgment is the authentic assessment.
Yeah.
That's where kids get to show and know. And it's a really interesting conversation. Actually unpack that.
We can't have authentic instruction, which I think, teachers can be more familiar with, without authentic assessment. It doesn't make sense to assess in a traditional way if you are teaching in an authentic way. So you absolutely need to have both. And it's funny too, you mentioned the difference between formative and summative assessment. There's a quote by an author. She says, if we're either teaching students or we're teaching the curriculum regardless of the students. And that's where formative assessment comes in.
Yes.
Have to embed those formative checks. And I was going to ask you too, when you're talking about student agency and, we're talking about all these things, bringing back the joy of teaching. I often think that sometimes testing is what kind of brought us away from some of that. But just like you said, if you focus on the standards and everything that you do is based on that and based on, of course, where the students fall in their learning styles and how they, giving them their agency, then the curriculum follows fine. You don't have to, do pacing guides and really like stick to these strict, fun. I mean, I don't know why people, schools buy textbooks anymore, but, why follow all of those when really you can just, as long as you're teaching to the standards, then you don't have to worry about teaching to a test, right? That's not what we want to do. But there's so many opportunities in the classroom for teachers to really work with the students together so that they are in control and in charge of their learning. And what are some of the strategies that you suggest? I know that one that I just think just covers all bases is making sure that you're conferencing with students, making sure that you are building into your lessons time to meet with students one-on-one or in small groups, because you learn what they do and don't know. You are not leading those conferences. Students can be leading those conferences. And then also it gives you that time to build relationships with students, because you talked about that SEL component. And it's such an easy way. You don't need technology to do that, except when other students are doing work, you can give them technology to gather some formative data. But teachers are truly the best form of formative assessment. Do you see conferencing also as an important element to student agency?
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. What I would add to conferencing, and I think it's kind of the mature next step for educators and for students, is to scaffold that.
Yeah.
So in some of the rubrics and tools we use, there's a really nice self-understanding rubric that actually allows a student to select, where am I now and where do I want to be? And to actually build that conferencing process around the lens of self-understanding and student agency. It's often easy to say, but even as adults, we find it hard to communicate that. And conferencing can feel overwhelming if there's not kind of a structure to it.
Yes.
There's a really nice sort of one-page rubric that we use. And there's a school here in Queensland that's done an amazing job of this. They've actually turned their, pastoral care or their role marking. Often schools have that 15-minute kind of check-in before the day starts. And they've turned that into a program that they call Learnerpreneur. And they've used that self-understanding rubric to have students have agency and have their conferencing linked around where am I now and what's my growth. And they've done that against some of what teachers or educators might call the soft skills, but they're the most critical skills, you know. I need to learn to be able to collaborate. I need to focus on my communication. I need to look at cooperation. So all of those skills and attributes that we need, you know, when we go and get a job, it's very, very rare that people say, and what rank did you get in English? Or were you that one? You know, we're teaching the wrong things. You know, employers look for, are you confident? Can you communicate? Do you care for people? Are you resilient? Have you got, you know, a good balance of that? And in the graduate profiles that we see emerging, we often see those words listed, you know, when our students graduate from here. But we don't often see the rubric or the measurement of that, both for students and their families. Imagine the power of conferencing where the student, the parent, and the teacher are in the room, and the student presents with a tool or a rubric or a scaffolded conversation. You know, I was here in my learning journey, or look at my, you know, and the little kindy prep students can do this too. Look at my first picture I drew, and look at my one at the end of the year where I wrote my name on it. And that's the learning journey. And that's really powerful. And there's something about that. And likewise, our graduating students can talk at a really sophisticated level about what they now aspire to do, where they be, and to actually assess that graduate profile in terms of, you know what, I am graduating from this, you know, we call them high schools, but proudly, I feel that I've met the attributes as a learner, and I am ready for my next step, be that a trade qualification, entering employment, or heading off to college. And there's something about our role as educators to actually scaffold that into the conversation.
Yeah, Deb, are you finding teachers are open to changing their pedagogy and moving in this direction? Do they tell you it's too much work? What are you hearing from them?
Well, you have to have the principal at the table for any change process in any school or system. You know, the superintendent and principal has to be there. And I mentioned before the assumptions. Often what happens in those conversations is a teacher will turn to the principal and say, well, don't we have to do all those 6 pieces of assessment? And the principal will say, no, we actually don't. So the myths and legends in teaching have crept in, and the layer upon layer. In our new planning documents in some of the Australian curriculum, I say to a teacher, just point to me where it says that. And they say, but it must say that. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Right.
Don't we have to do that final test? No, it doesn't say anywhere there. It says we've got to have a range of assessments and judgment, but that's teacher judgment, student judgment, peer evaluation. You can collect that in a variety of ways. Have they met the standard and at what level? And then moderate that with your fellow colleagues. So in some ways, Jerri, this is much less work, and it gets easier because engagement gets higher. And in a couple of schools we've worked with, you know, they used to talk behaviour. And I'll say if you could use one word, let's take behaviour management plans away. What would happen if we had an engagement plan?
Yep. Oh.
School has an engagement plan, and they're going to focus on curriculum, making learning fun, and, you know, and kids actually come to the table for that. I had a school I was overworking with some of the group of superintendents a month ago in the States. And they were talking about, you know, was behaviour an issue in Australia, Deb? And I'm like, it absolutely is. I said, but we should have a conversation about engagement. And they said, oh, and I said, we should also have a conversation about who's not coming to school, because I think there's a frightening growth area of students who haven't returned.
Yeah.
And when they returned, they found learning at home maybe easier during COVID, or didn't feel the value of it and don't feel connected. And there's a really important piece for the mental health of the globe and the country to get young people back with peers, with educators and teachers. We're the only person only profession that can do this job. We don't want our young people to go down a pathway of mental health and connection and feeling valued and know that they will contribute to society in some form. That's what we teach as teachers, isn't it? That's the love of teaching. That's what changes lives. And every student knows the teacher in their life that changed their life. We've all played that game. Tell us your favourite teacher. We can all remember that person. And I guess we've got to do more of that, particularly in this time, and get kids back to learn. And if it's fun and engaging, if teachers are meeting kids with it, and if they're focused on an engagement plan for their class, it actually gets easier. And the number of teachers, when they do a small piece of work with us and the principals, just say, you changed our life. Like, seriously, you flipped our thinking. And we get them to, kind of focus on that student who's perhaps not coming or least served in the learning process, or that they feel they can't teach. And we kind of wrap some support around them, saying, what are the range of strategies? We're all in this together, and not that isolated judgment. So there was something about teaching where we've become a bit isolated as professionals when it's a bit tough or when we don't know what to do next. And of course, when they present back their story, it, without a doubt, 100% of the time, a teacher will say, oh my goodness, I really didn't know that student. And when I did, and I changed a couple of little things, their attendance goes up, their academic achievement goes up, and they attain, the minimum benchmark or the C standard or above. But more importantly, and in my work and research around inclusion, we often talked about for educators, when you make an adjustment for one child, all children in the class lived academically, and that's absolutely what we see in the learner first. Our entire cohort of results lifted. And I'll say yes, because our brightest students understand a range of adjustments and a range of authentic ways. They don't go for the easiest option. They actually raise their bar as well, and either in the peer mode or in their own. So you go to the teacher, oh, so could I do it a bit differently too? Could I show you in a different way? And so academically, in the schools that are working with us, and our signature schools across the globe, we are seeing extraordinary academic lift and engagement in those schools. So when we do
Well,
something, everyone benefits.
I think the lift also comes into play when there is engagement, because sometimes kids will take the easier route if they aren't engaged. That engagement has to be there in order for that motivation to be lifted. So it really is that driver, that engagement. And you mentioned too, I see that all the time when I work with teachers. If you're having trouble with classroom management, it's engagement that is the best form of classroom management. It really is. And so let's work on your instructional strategies first. And speaking of instructional strategies, I just want to ask a difference between what you look at when you talk about student agency, comparing that to personalized learning. How do you see the differences are, or overlap, or is it the same thing?
Jamie, I see that differently. Personalised learning is really hard.
Yeah.
And perhaps too hard for teachers to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we say that, there's an expectation or judgment on us that we are going to do that for 25 students in front of us, or times that I'm a high school teacher by the 5 classes or 6 classes I teach.
Right.
And that is so overwhelming. It's just almost, it's not doable.
Right.
And so it falls over in the notion. If you're actually designing your lesson with students in mind and understanding who your class is and giving them a sense of agency and choice around curriculum and assessment, then that is way more personalised than often in personalised learning. I see people going down such an individual path.
Right.
We've all taught, haven't we? How impossible is that task to do that well?
It's funny, when I get asked to do workshops on personalized learning, I really kind of talk to them more about how to modify personalized learning instead of doing it full out. Because if I tell teachers about personalized learning and do activities with them on it so that they better understand it, the more they listen, the more they say, this is impossible, just like you said. It almost
Right.
can be, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I give them sort of a modified version of it that makes a little bit more sense, which mirrors more of the student agency that you're
And
referring to.
kind of want to peel that onion back and go, well, actually, it's just the heart of teaching. So let's
Yeah.
just go back to what is the lesson design? How do I make that engaging for all of the learners that I know I've got in front of me? And how can I just give, rather than personalized, how can I give that student agency to the kids to say, okay, I want you to be able to show me in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Can you meet that criteria? And what sits or misses sometimes in personalized learning is the deep learning skills that we need kids to have. And that's actually often in groups, cooperation, collaboration, being able to work together, being able to care for each other, because they're actually the life skills that globally we need, everyone to have to live in a more healthy, resilient economy and life balance. So there's something about personalized learning. I think as educators, we always want to do the right thing. So we hear that and then think, oh my goodness, I've got to have a separate chart, a separate file, a separate process. I've got to conference 25 students individually. I've got to have to. Absolutely. So we don't have time for that. And there's something about the classroom and teaching that we can take those personalized elements and put them into the curriculum, and kids will see that personalization or that agency or that ability to connect in a far different ways. It's a really fascinating conversation. It's almost like personalized learning became one of those trendy buzzwords
Yeah.
and bulb on the Christmas tree, that it was just a thing to do. And then someone thought, oh, maybe more parents will sign up to come to my school if I say or promote or market. We have a personalized learning plan. If we said, look, we have a really interesting way of connecting teachers to students, we have a high engagement plan, we have innovative curriculum and a variety of assessment, and we're going to meet with you a couple of times a year to show and tell that, and your student will be part of that story, then that's personalised too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly
easier,
right.
far easier for the teacher to do.
Yeah.
So it's not really developing a whole new way of doing things. It's making some small adjustments here and there as to how you are delivering lessons and how the teaching and learning looks in your classroom. What are
And
some of those small adjustments that make the biggest difference, that have the most power?
um, most of it is in the mindset of the teacher and the unpacking of the assessment and the realization that the formative counts.
Yes.
And there was a fascinating conversation here in a year 10 class where the students' draft, the English assignment, was better than their final submit. And so there's been a really robust conversation. Which one do you mark?
Right.
And of course, the one that we should mark is the draft.
Yeah.
The student misinterpreted the teacher feedback after conferencing, and what they submitted perhaps wasn't as good. So in a formative way, where we're catching kids at what they're good at and what they're best at, which one do you mark?
Yeah.
And a really good educational, and because there sits all the assumptions, because teachers say, well, that's not fair. Well, hang on, is it, Ken? This is a piece of work that you've worked on for 6 weeks in a unit of work. You've seen the evidence. Their draft is better. It was submitted. It was marked. You gave feedback. You have to actually form a judgment about, can that student meet the standard? Well, yes, they met the standard back in week 5.
That's the ultimate question, right?
Yeah, and that's the ultimate question. And so there's some really, they're the little things, Jerri. And I'd have to say to you, most of it is in unlocking the rules that teachers think they have to do, and having a moment with the principal when it's facilitated in a conversation. And every single time it's like, do we have to do that? But what about the excursion policy? Can we leave the classroom to do some work outside? Yes, we can. but what if the kids are naughty? Well, they're high engagement, that they're going to be less naughty outside than they are inside,
Organized chaos.
yeah, and love of learning. And in those moments, that they are best teachable moments.
So the principal is the critical piece.
Absolutely. As principals, and we've all been them, or superintendents, we are the keepers of culture and rules and systems, and helping teachers unravel that and getting that clearer now in our own mind is really important. And I guess, we're all learners and we've come a long way in our learning journey in education over 30 years. Then that's the gift that we give back, is go, yeah, there was a period of time when all of those things seemed like they were just so important. But there's a new era in front of us and a new opportunity. And what we've learnt over the roughness of the last few years is that we need to do things a bit differently and pivot. And the things, we've got the least amount of engagement globally in education. We've got, differences between cultures and education. We've got poverty as a really large issue, is actually the thing that will change the globe. Teachers are in the driving seat for doing this differently. And if you haven't got all your kids coming to class or to your school or building, then it's time to stop and go, actually, let's just stop, rethink, refresh. Because these people, if we're not educating them, are going to be looking after us down the track or leading the globe or doing the next clever and creative thing. And we are their best guide to open up the pathway to education. So it is the role of the principal and superintendent. In the work that we do with schools, we won't engage with a school unless the principal or superintendent is at the table.
Part of it, yeah.
And it's not a program of work. It's actually the unpacking. Often people will say to me, oh, is there a booklet or a product? I'm like, no, there's no booklet or product. You've got the booklets and products. We're going to help you unpack. We're going to help you refine them back. And every single school or building has a list of goals and attributes and learners and this and values and assumption. There's so many things that we have. And we use those things. They're really good, but often they're not enacted.
You're just digging in deep into them. Where this level.
Yeah. And then, giving, and certainly do have the tools and tricks, and have got the rubrics to facilitate those conversations, because they do need to be facilitated. They're not easy to have. And they are to take teachers on that learning journey of, oh, that is possible. Or will I get in trouble? Like, a number of times I hear a teacher say, I get in trouble? Or someone's, but we're all so compliant. We're the good kids. And we don't want to make mistakes, and we want to do the right thing by kids. But the unleashing of that is we will actually do our best work and our strongest work if we go back to the art of teaching, if we really unpack what skills and competencies we want for young people, and if we put that into the curriculum. And I'm not, I say to every system, if there's a standardized test, there's a standardized test. But if you do this good work all the way through, the test will take care of itself.
That's right.
Do not focus on it. Do not worry about it. If you have taught students, there's, like everywhere, really large conversation. Well, if kids have to sit external exams in year 11 or 12, we better start practicing those in year 9. I'm like, no, that's the last thing we should do. That is not the development of, the learning journey that we need to take kids on. We need them to have all of those other skills, the pedagogies and deep learning, the 6 C's. We need all of that embedded in those formative years. Those senior exams will take care of themselves. Yeah, students will by that point have a range of skills and abilities and know how to navigate that. It is not about, but we got scared along the way, or we saw someone do it and then thought we should do it. The number of times at schools, they want to be an early adopter, and then they want to go, and then they want to sell it to their community. And I don't underestimate, and we have a very large piece of work about engaging parents as learners and the community as real partners. Because in the unraveling of those assumptions, some of them sit at a community level. Some of them sit with expectations about superintendents feel very challenged by some of those community expectations. So, we have to show them also how to peel that onion back and go, we don't necessarily need that shiny program. We're actually going to embed that here, or we're going to stop doing this one because we're actually doing it in class. And, those additional things then fall into that. It's fascinating for teachers, and you can certainly jump onto our website and have a look at some of the podcasts and things that Joanne has put up and we've got there. But 100% of the time, teachers will say, wow, just wow. I got back to the job I love,
Yes.
had more time with kids. Parents, really thanked me. And my least served learners, or the kids I thought I couldn't teach, actually got their best report card in that term of work. And it's something about us reflecting on that and then building that forward. And we have to start slowly. So when we work in a school, it's usually a 3-year journey. This is not an overnight, this is unraveling decades of rules and assumptions and ways of working that put instructional practice and student agency and love of teaching back on the table.
Yes. And the teachers and the administrators have to be a bit vulnerable when they begin this work, because they're opening up and looking at everything and saying, is this putting the learner first? Or who is putting first? And that could be
Teachers are risk takers.
tough. Yes.
But just like the student conferencing, the tools and rubrics that sit in our work make that really less vulnerable, because it's just a rubric that says, where do we all think we're at? And I did the same piece of work with the inclusion policy in Queensland. I had a lovely rubric where some teachers will say, oh, we're really good at that. And then someone else says, I don't think we're so good. And the richness of the conversation and the change process for the school is the gap in between. So why do you think we're so good? And why do you think we're only just beginning that? And what is it that we have to do to meet in the middle? And that's the growth space.
Yeah.
And so the tools make that very easy and not as vulnerable as you would think, Jerri, because it's actually scaffolded. And then it's slow about what are we writing into next year's strategic plan that becomes the focus for how to do that. So if, and there's some really simple questions, do all teachers in your school believe all kids can learn? And even that simple question starter, really powerful. Do all teachers in your building think all these kids can learn? And the truth of that, and when people have to scaffold that, is actually, well, based on the staff room conversation we hear, no.
Right.
But if we truly go, well, actually, no, we don't think all kids can learn. But our behaviour or our assumptions or the conversations we have might point us in a different direction. And so it's some of those, there's some really interesting questions for leaders to work their way through slowly. And often a principal or a superintendent will say to me, Deb, you don't say anything I don't believe in. You just get to say it. And I said, and you get to participate. I said, and together we form a great team. I'm just saying what's hard for you to say and what as a learning community. Sometimes something needs to be facilitated. And we find in our work, and Joanne and I often have the conversation, what is it about it that we do? Because it's not I said, it's actually that we understand the teaching and learning process and student agency, and we are helping flip the thinking about how to do that and facilitate that in a way that makes it easy, and that growth of whatever people call it. Some people like to call it transformational change or school improvement, or, we want to get our next lift, or we're a high performing system. and we want to be outstanding. And what is it that takes us to the next lift? And each and every time, it is about understanding your system, engaging with parents as real partners, measuring what matters most in terms of the curricula, and having that deep respect for high expectations and a culture of change.
Absolutely. And I love that it's not a gotcha thing. Like we hooked you on this. It's a, and I think from
There's
what I hear from you, you have protocols and ways to help the administrators have these conversations, which is very important.
Which I
Step
guess
to build that
becomes a
culture.
superintendent's professional learning plan for the year. In many
Yes.
groups, often myself, but we've got all these other things we need to do. And I'm like, do you really need to do them?
Right.
And I sort of look and go, oh, I think if you actually privilege your teachers and your students in a learner first, those other things you've brought in will take care of themselves. And I
Absolutely.
thought, we'd bought this wellbeing plan that we were going to do. What's that? You know?
Right.
And it's like, well, actually, that's what we want teachers to do all day, every day. And we want kids to feel a connection to their teacher. And we want them to know that if they're not having a good day, that someone's got them and that
Yeah.
someone will notice. And there will be support that wraps around that. And there will be counsellors, but that the teacher's got that, you know? And once upon a time, Jerry, Jamie, we had that.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And I
We
always
had
blame
that.
it on testing often, but
Yeah.
I feel like we strayed. And I think especially now in this day and age, it's essential to get back to what's really important. I think teachers are seeing that too. I know that I've seen that in staff that I've worked with. So
And it's throughout the academic year, and to every teacher listening, I'd say, you've got this. This is
oh
the
yeah,
best job in the world. And add something little tomorrow to your assessment thinking and give a little bit of student agency to that thought process about what you can do. And sometimes it's the littlest thing that you flip, and you'll
very
get
true.
further engagement. And if you've got an assessment task you're about to roll out, add just something to it, you know. Say to the kids, actually, just show me what you can do.
That's
I
right.
don't mind if it's done as an oral, a video, a YouTube clip, TikTok ad, whatever floats your boat, show me that you know that. And
Yes.
teachers will come back and say, oh my God, that was almost every kid did an A standard. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
that happened.
it's ultimate buy-in, ultimate engagement when you're giving students that opportunity to choose how they show their stuff. That product differentiation is so important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, everything is from the perspective of the, the test development or the teacher. Instead, it's from the perspective of the student. And you learn so much more about their understanding when you're giving them those opportunities to show their understanding in ways that suit them best. It really makes all the difference in the world, for sure.
And
For
it
sure.
doesn't matter where we are in the globe, it's the same issues for teachers and educators. And I
We
suspect
set it out. Yes.
the same solution.
It's true.
And
Of
Bev
course.
Hamilton, our executive director, is actually in Australia at the moment. And she said to me last night at dinner, Deb, it's just the same. I went, that's right, it is. And the
Mhm.
solutions to what systems need to do and think about are similar. And but it is flipping our thinking. It is
Yeah.
actually flipping it back to not teachers first. And there's been a lot of preferencing of what might have made it easy, or we thought made it easy, but it's actually made it harder. You know, people feel like if someone gives them a curriculum, they've got to start at lesson 1 and teach it all the
That's
way
the
through to
way.
lesson 20.
Right.
And that's not teaching.
No,
The-
there are some schools that are doing that still, and that's part of the problem. But if they realize, again, like you said, it starts with administration. There has to be that flip there first, and then they are driving that culture and that support and, scaffolds for teachers. Therefore, do what is best for
And
students.
Jamie, if someone gave you or I 20 lessons in a row and said, you're going to work your way through this, we wouldn't go. Our engagement would be low. We would just,
100%.
I just like people, we wouldn't do that. Let's not do it to children.
No.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, this has been so great to share some of these nuggets of strategies for teachers and for administrators in really putting students first in their teaching. It doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be difficult. There are simple flips that can be done, as you mentioned, and we're hoping that teachers and staff can really focus in on that. It's a new school year, and hopefully that can be a good direction.
And Deb, where can we find you online and learn more?
Yeah, you can look at the Learner First website, and obviously have lots of followers on LinkedIn as well, and bounce around the globe, and very happy to work with school communities or districts to be part of the change process. And you've had Joanne on the show, and as you know, she's writing her next book, and she uses some of this work to really prove that a global curriculum and a global rethink about education is what we need next. And the schools that work with us are then often published in those publications, podcasts, or books. So there's something new on the website, you know, every month, a new podcast, a new blog, a new piece of thinking. And of course, you know, it's all there, and happy to reach out, and happy to host some districts from the States to come and visit and see some of the work in Australia. It's more the same than different. And I think, you know, globally we're learning that, and together have the change agents that do that. We've got a team of consultants in the United States that work as part of the Learner First team, and are busy bouncing around for the start of the academic year doing planning days, student-free lesson design. So I'm sure you'll hear about us further, and we look forward to having a partnership with you and coming back maybe in 12 months' time or 6 months' time and giving you a bit of an update on all of those gems that we've got to share.
That sounds terrific.
Yes.
We put these resources in the show notes.
And is the podcast on the Learner First website?
Yes.
Can access the podcast from there?
Okay. Yeah, it's a podcast and blogs. So, yeah, all terrific.
All right. Well, Deb, thank you so much for getting up so early in Australia to visit with us today. And it was a pleasure to hear your story, the work that you're doing. It is so important. And I hope that we can reach a lot of people to hear this.
Lovely. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.